Hello and welcome to Salop. We're back again. It's the end of season review. How you doing, Mike?
Yeah, all right. I'm exhausted after the prep for this one. I don't usually do huge amounts of prep for the pod. I'm a bit of a vibesman, but I think I've done more work with this than university work and most of my jobs up to date. So we'll get through this one. There's loads to look back on, and then we can go and have a big rest. I think completely forget this season.
And yeah, welcome back on, Chris. Chris, how you doing?
Not so bad, thank you. Looking forward to hearing from Professor Mike today. By the sounds of it, he's done his research. I'm going to. It's a role reversal, Mike. I think I'll do a bit more vibes. Although I've got a few tasty facts up my sleeve for when it gets to my section.
Cool. So yeah, how are we going to split this podcast up? Unfortunately, and Dan can't join us. He's supporting a charity event, which is great. So we've been quite easy to split the podcasts up. So yeah, Mike is going to do kind of the hangover from last season and the kind of grim winter under Appleton, and then yeah, Chris is going to cover the Cowan era. So yeah, obviously that's a little bit brighter in terms of results, and obviously our safety. And then I'll wrap up the podcast with some stats and also looking at through the retain list, etc. So yeah, that'll be the end of season review. We're not sure how long it will last. It might be 2 parts. But yeah, thanks for joining us. And yeah, let's jump into it.
So yeah, as Ollie said, I'm going to take us from looking way back to the relegation of the season before. In honour of that, I'm wearing a signed match-worn John Marquis shirt from that season. The worry for that is that it fits me. So, might explain why John Marquis looked a little bit off the pace at times, because a professional footballer shirt should never fit me. But it was gifted to me by a mate of mine who got it at the player sort of sponsors evening. Said John was a lovely fella, but unfortunately he didn't get a contract. So R.I.P. John. This is in honour of all your wonderful work for the club. So yeah, looking back, obviously we got relegated pretty soon after that, despite the relegation. Michael Appleton was given the job as full-time head coach in the summer, and that's sort of what kicked off the preparation for this season. I look back at that a little bit, and there was an open letter from Mickey Moore at the time, apologising to the fans, obviously saying results weren't good enough, all the usual stuff. But looking back, and this will come up a lot during my little retrospective, some incredible things to remember that you forget at the time. That letter was so full of incredible ass covering from Mickey Moore. It was cringy to read back, actually. In a letter sort of talking about the previous season, explaining why Michael Appleton is now the manager, the amount of excuses he made for the managerial appointments, the reasons why his football philosophy hadn't been in the job, hadn't come in to the football club in the how many years he'd been in the job was mad to look back at, really. And looking back, he was a bit of a fraud, wasn't the old Mickey? But he had now decided that Michael Appleton, despite him being his 4th manager of his tenure, was going to be the guy that implemented his football identity, despite the fact that Michael Appleton had 9 games at the end of the previous season, with 1 win, 2 draws, and only 5 points to show for it, which I'm not sure that's a great audition for the job. I know that he had a number of person squad to work with, but I don't think we were all loving the fact that he got the job full time. But that was where we stood. His point per game in the previous season was 0.185, so not getting any points. So it didn't all go well. But remember that stat, because we'll look at his points per game for his other sort of games, and it never really got much better, is the truth of it. So Liam Dooley had a letter out as well, said he's looking forward for a resurgence and some talk of a promotion push. So with the context of how the season went, we can look at how quite badly we went against the plan that they were putting in place. To manage that, and by the way, anytime you guys want to jump in on any of this, you remember, you just feel free. It's not a lecture, it's a podcast. So, you hop in. To facilitate this potential promotion push, there was obviously a massive overhaul of players. We saw pretty much a large section of the previous squad go. We had people like Toby Savage, Jamal Blackman, Morgan Feeney, Aaron Pierre, some experienced players we'd had in a while, and then some guys that came in last minute, Rossiter, Gate, Wheeler, and then Shipley, all departed, as well as probably the only effective loanee of the previous season, Josh Feeney. So a big restructure to make. And we did that. We signed, I think it was 11 or 12 players in the end, including loans. Didn't really spend any money, would be the crucial thing to look back on. I think probably maybe the only one we spent any money was possibly a FIFA Brook. We might have spent a little nominal fee on him. But we brought in experienced players, Anderson, Klukas, Stubbs, Boyle, and that was presumably the intention to be the spine of the team, along with players like Sang, Scully for a bit of energy. And then the loans were, remember Eli Harrison from Man United, the football playing goalkeeper? And then obviously Tommy McDermott, Cabia, who I think was probably the most effective of all the signings on with Boyle and Eovian. So a completely refreshed squad. plenty of experience, plenty of new blood, some energy from the loanies. I don't know. Do you remember looking back how you felt about that transfer window?
Yeah, I do. I remember there was one funny, interesting conversation when we signed like Lucas and Anderson. There was a lot of excitement among those when we signed those players, and there was a number of Shrewsbury Town fans thinking that we were going to be in the playoffs. And I remember me and Pooley, Andy, were kind of going against that. And yeah, it wasn't, obviously I prefer not to have had the chance to do this, but I did go back my receipts after a few months in the season when we'd obviously had a terrible start. And while I was trying to be optimistic, and I was hoping that some of our players that we had from League One were going to perform really well in League Two. It didn't strike me as recruitment that was going to be groundbreaking. There was obviously a good theme of Cheltenham players still as well hanging around. And yeah, we didn't have a lot of faith in Mickey Moore, Mike. I think it's probably my summary. I'm interested remember if Chris can cast his mind back. What was your thoughts at the time, Chris?
Yeah, so I suppose the one transfer that I did like, that I think over time has proved to be a good signing, was Will Boyle. I thought that was decent. And do you remember the club's signing video when we brought him in? And they did quite a funny video about him setting off in his car to Gillingham and then getting his phone call from Mickey Moore, turning around and coming to Shrewsbury. I enjoyed that, a little poke at Gillingham and at Gareth Ainsworth as well, because they'd been in for him as well. And Boyle worked out. But we signed Boyle, Stubbs, Anderson, like you say, and the concern there was the lack of pace in that defence. And it's interesting. They had I don't know if you call it a fans forum, at the open day. Appleton did an event where the fans you had to pay for a ticket, and I went along to that. And I actually asked him about those signings and whether there was any concern about the lack of speed in that defence. And it was interesting the way Appleton answered that night, because I got the impression that he himself hadn't had full say in those selections. I think we were very much in a period when Mickey Moore was doing some of the work, and Appleton was having to almost carry the can for it. And by the end, Michael gets that later in his section, Appleton was moving away from the back three and going to what was maybe more natural to him. But I feel he had it sort of forced upon him in the early stages, and it was never something he was comfortable with. And we probably didn't have the right players to play that system, because our defence lacks pace, and that was evident from day one, and certainly from game two. When you get to that as well, you started to see just what a mess we were defensively.
Yeah, and I think that recruitment, when you look back at it, in hindsight, you can say it was terrible because the season didn't go very well. But I think they were trying to address some of the inadequacies of the previous season. We were bad at the back. We had, Morgan Feeney, Aaron Pierre, and Josh Feeney would have been our centre backs. On paper, Anderson, Stubbs, Boyle, it looks like an upgrade because they're experienced. They've been there. They played at a higher level. So you can sort of try and see what they can do. But every fan could see, particularly in pre-season, the glaring holes of no pace at the back, no real midfield battler in there, no left back. Mal Benning still getting a game, and we're putting Sam Klukas out there. So there was big deficiencies that weren't addressed. So you can see where they were trying to go early on. And I think Anderson, Stubbs and Boyle all came in quite early with Klukas. But after that, they didn't follow through with the stuff that we needed to complete a squad, I think was part of the problem as well.
Left wing back is a real mystery now. You look back at it, that we played Klukas there. I guess the plan was for Benning, to be the main man in that position.
God knows. They must have had something fall through, I presume.
Maybe. It's very strange.
Even right back
the goalkeeper was interesting. I was just going to say, Mike, I wanted to call out the goalkeeper signing as well, because there was a lot of excitement about bringing in Eli Harrison. And, we were told clearly this was the way Appleton wanted to play. He can play with the ball on the ground, but they seemed, having watched him play a few games, they seemed to forget the one key aspect is that you've got to actually be a good goalkeeper. It's all very well and good being a good footballer, but you've got to actually be able to keep the ball out the net. And unfortunately, Eli didn't do that often enough for us. Too many mistakes. He was too anxious. I'm sure he'll go on and have a good career, but he didn't look ready to be thrust into a League Two side at that point in his career.
No, and it didn't take long, did it, for your concerns, Chris, to be evident on the pitch?
Defensively, no.
In terms of results, Mike.
Yeah, so, looking back, again, pre-season's a great thing to look at with hindsight, because you can never really tell from pre-season, but, the way it was structured looked a bit strange. We had a couple of behind closed doors games, still trying out lots of trialists, switching whole teams at half-time. I know it's to get minutes in legs and stuff, but we were still really dipping into the sort of scraping the barrel of who was still available on the transfer market late on. So we started with the behind closed doors game, and then we played a 3 against lower league time sides, Leamington, Telford, Kidderminster. We beat them all, as you'd expect to do. But as soon as we came up against our first, what I would call proper opposition in Bolton, we got absolutely done 5-2. It's a game I went to, and we looked miles off it. They had pace, they had energy, they had skill, and we just couldn't handle them on the night at all. I strongly remember, I think it was Harrison in goal for that, and I think he had a bit of a mare that night as well. And that really set alarm bells ringing. Is as soon as you come up against your first proper, what you call football league team, it was really night and day in terms of quality. And then the only other real game in pre-season we had was a 2-2 draw at Burnley. I didn't watch that, but I believe that was slightly better. But you look back at it, 3 wins, 1 draw, 3 losses, bit of a mixed bag, and that's kind of how the season went. Really, is we seemed inconsistent and we struggled against anybody with any sort of quality, really. And that drew us into the league, really. So what I'll do with this, my intention was to chop it up into sort of 10-game periods. You always judge the season after the first 10 games. We'll look at the next 10 games. Unfortunately, after that, poor old Michael Appleton didn't last another 10 games. So the last one's just 7. But I thought that's the best way to break it up, to give it a bit of context. So we come into the first 10 games. We opened the season with a 0-0 draw against Bromley, but then very quickly lost 4 on the bounce. 2 heavy away losses against Tranmere and Notts County. And that opening section of the season really put us behind the 8 ball. We didn't score a goal in the first 4, I think it was. We conceded 4 twice in the first 4 games. It was a disaster of a start to the season. I can remember feeling so negative and despondent about it. Particularly Notts County game, I watched that on the telly when we were away, and we just got run off the park. But it was 5 points from 30 in those first 10 games. We only scored 7 goals. We conceded 20. 0.16 points per game. It was even worse than the 9 that he'd had at the end of the previous season in terms of points per game. So he'd had a whole summer. He'd built a squad. Mickey Moore had been there. We were implementing this football DNA, this ideology, and we'd got worse. And I can remember in that period of that 10 games, just tearing my hair out of the amount of playing out from the back we were trying to do with a slow team who didn't have passes at the back. We couldn't get a ball through midfield. And how dogmatic he was about that approach and how much it clearly wasn't working. And it was a really despondent time. And that set us up for a very difficult season. It's very difficult to dig yourself out of a hole like that. And I just sort of, throw back to you guys. What memories have you got of that opening 10-game stretch, some of those really abject performances and how hard we found it to hit the ground running? Yeah, do you want to go first, Chris?
Yeah, so the one that stood out for me was Tranmere away, second game of the season. Bromley 0-0 was I suppose it wasn't a great game, but it was a point, and that we were in a situation where you go to Tranmere and think if we can get a win here, beat Colchester at home, it might have looked like a decent start. But instead, we came out at Tranmere, 12:30 kickoff live on Sky, huge away following. It was absolutely packed in the away end that day, and we got spanked 4-0. And most of that, Tranmere looked decent that day, which was ironic because obviously they eventually had a tough season too. But we did most of the damage to ourselves. The defensive performance that day was absolutely shambolic. The passing it out from the back wasn't working. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Harrison had actually picked up an injury and missed this game. I think Toby Savin was in goal. But I'm not going to blame Toby Savin. I seem to remember George Nurse, Tom Anderson having absolute stinkers. And it was absolutely horrific to watch, and it was depressing as hell. And it carried on. You talked about the lack of goals. So we failed to score in the first 3 games of the season. We failed to score in our first 3 home games as well. It took us until the 3-1 defeat against Salford in the middle of September to actually score in front of our own fans. You said 7 goals in those first 10 games. 3 of them came in the 1 game at Barnet. So in the other 9, just the 4 goals. So it was a recipe for disaster, wasn't it? We couldn't score goals and we couldn't stop them going in at the other end. And this was in League Two, and it was a bit of a shock, maybe. Think when we went down, I'd remember telling my son that the one thing from League Two is you'll probably see us win a few more football matches at least. And these first 10 games were a bit of a shock to the system when you realised we're not going to see us win a lot more football matches, and it's going to be another war of attrition just to stay up. So the first 10 games were a shock to me, and a depressing one at that.
It was really jarring, I thought, how much we struggled in League Two, because I was exactly the same saying to friends and my son and stuff. Oh, that all the other teams will be rubbish now. We'll be a better team in a bad league. But Christ, the level of League Two has gone up significantly since we were in there, hasn't it? And I think that's the same for the conference, and that's why again next season is a pretty similar importance to get off to a good run for Cowan and that. But I'm sure we'll get to that. But yeah, it was a tough first 10, wasn't it? I was looking back at it and our first league goal was Marquise, which was a consolation in a 4-1 loss. Our first actual goal was a miss hit from Sang in the cup, wasn't it? But we weren't creating a lot. But then I look back and that 10-game league. So my 10 games are always going to be league games. I'll talk about the cup, but I'm really focusing on the leagues. That 10-game league set came to an end with a 2-1 home loss to MK Dons. Can anybody remember who scored against MK Dons?
It was. I wanted to say Chuck Zadiki, but I'm wrong, aren't I? That was a different game later in the season.
No,
it was that one. It was Chuck.
Yeah.
I remember it was a good goal, wasn't it?
Oh, the distance one from range.
Yeah.
Oh, that summed up Shrewsbury Town, didn't it? Because Shrewsbury Town fans were chanting. Do you remember what they were chanting at the time? They were chanting anti-Roland chants.
Yeah,
really
there you
loud.
go.
And then he just smashed it in from miles out.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I saw that, it felt like Chuck Tanike played for us about 6 years ago, which was
yeah, I can't believe
very
it's
strange.
Weird to think that he actually played for us this season.
Yeah,
it just
and he scored as well. So that meant nothing, and we ended that 10-game period 23rd place, second bottom. We were already 3 points off safety at that point. The only team below us were Steve Cottrell's Cheltenham, who had 1 point less. I don't know if he was manager then, was he? But yeah, we'll call him Steve Cottrell's Cheltenham. So also, let's not forget other things happen at the club during that 10-game period. The last of the Irish three, Max Matter, left the club by mutual consent on the 1st of September. Again, another player feels like played for us 10 years ago, Max Matter. The fact that he was here so long, I thought worth mentioning. We also got knocked out of the Carabao Cup in our third game. We lost 3-1 to Grimsby, and like I said, that was the first goal of the season. But again, it didn't really mean a huge amount. At this point, after 10 games already, like you said, Ollie, fan pressure was very much ramping up, wasn't it? Remembering back, there was lots of anti-Roland stuff. Mickey Moore was getting loads. It was the first mention I could find looking back through the records of the 1886 group. Remember those guys and their ineffective campaign? The less said about them, the better. But I just thought worth remembering that there was a sort of a fans campaign group that didn't get off the ground. And then, so ironically, they started up on the 12th of August. That's the first time they came into existence. And then 3 days later, on August the 15th, what happened? Our good friend Mickey Moore left the club. Sorry, sad day for everybody involved. And that was just before we lost again to Colchester. So looking back on the reports of Mickey Moore leaving, he left by mutual consent. That was the message put out, very, very brief message put out by the club. No real reason apart from the mutual consent. They didn't link it to football reasons. They didn't link it to anything that had happened at the club. Loads of rumours came out of it, but I don't think it was ever really explained fully why Mickey Moore left Shrewsbury Town, was it? It was never linked to a specific thing in his job.
There may well be reasons for that, but there was all sorts that seemed to be going on. But whatever. I think we were not too bothered.
No, not too bothered. But classic Shrewsbury Town, everything happens behind closed doors. The fans are never really let to know. Just looking back on Mickey's time under his watch, the first year we nearly got relegated. The second year we did get relegated. He had 4 managers with completely different approaches for everyone. No consistency in his own approach. Buck passing all the time when things went wrong. Claim for things that he didn't even have anything to do with. A baffling transfer policy that seemed to change every year. 1 year it was getting diamonds from the Irish League. The next year it's buying old stages for a relegation battle. I don't know how you can you can't really point to anything positive that happened in his range. We did it to death when it happened, but I just thought worth looking back at a really baffling couple of years with him at the helm. And then Ollie mentioned this earlier, but it was a note I made as well. When it finished, Liam Dooley came out with a statement that sort of said, we're reviewing the structure at the club and how we move forward the director of football model. We've never replaced Mickey Moore. We've never mentioned the director of football model again. I think it's another lurch to a different solution now. Gav Cowan's I assume he's the manager again, and we don't have a director of football.
Well,
but again, interesting to see.
Bring this up. I wanted to bring this up, Mike, because you said I copied and pasted from that statement. It was in August 2025, and they said, we're assessing what has worked at other clubs, and we were weighing in carefully whether to continue with a director of football or return to a traditional structure. And it's classic Shrewsbury Town. They say one thing and they do something else. So actually, It's funny. I was really trying to find on the club website, like if I could find anything on their official of what is Gavin Cowan's title. Now, I eventually found like the list of kind of roles and responsibilities he's done as a head coach. And then also when I was going through, I found like this almost like statement from the club about how their commitment to the fans. And it says, quote from the club, Our values of integrity, passion, and respect guide all our interactions with fans, and when we're committed to building strong relations with our supporters based on trust and transparency. And we haven't heard anything about whether we have a director of football model or not. And we must be the only club in probably world football that has a head coach but no director of football, which is just baffling. And then also now I noticed that the club also refers to Gavin Cowan as the manager sometimes as well. So classic Shrewsbury Town Football Club, no transparency, no openness. And also around this point, and it's when they put in that statement, the CEO is now involved in transfers, is also the period when the Shrewsbury Town have decided not to tell us how long player or manager contracts are.
Yeah.
So when Gavin Cowan signed, we had no idea how long his deal was. And every signing we make now, we have no idea how they are. So all for the club. So the clubs say they want to act with trust and transparency, but typically for Shrewsbury Town, as we're still waiting for the chairman to explain why Steve Cottrell left, lack of transparency and openness from the club is a huge, I don't know, it's a big part of their culture of how they operate towards the fans.
And it goes against what they say. Your comment about what it says on the website about their approach to fan engagement and things. It's repeated as well because the fan unrest continued after Mickey Moore went. On the 29th of September, Roland Wycherley put out an open letter to the fans, if you remember, talking about the takeover because it had been silent since the previous Americans had pulled out. And so his open letter referenced that 2 other takeover deals had collapsed. They'd had 16 expressions of interest. They'd accepted 4, but none had been completed because of fit and proper tests and lack of proof of funds and things like that. Interesting 2 points in the letter. The first one was Roland Wycherley talked about from the previous takeover that collapsed. They'd learnt lessons about not communicating with fans. They were going to be open and transparent. Clearly hasn't happened because, again, we don't hear anything from behind the ivory tower. And then also he said, an interesting thing, he said Shrewsbury's poor league position in the relegation zone was affecting the valuation and discouraging buyers. Well, no shit, because, you've sort of led us down this path where we're not a very saleable asset, and then you're confused why nobody will pay you what you want for it. So just again, going back, more muddied thinking at executive level, it just reminds you that this season was a bit of a calamity on and off field, a chaotic mess is what I would describe it as. And it goes on as I go through more of it. So that leaves us after the first 10 games. We move into the next 10, which sort of goes from the 4th of October to the 9th of December. So that opens with a 0-0 away draw at Barrow. And what was actually, probably before Gav Cowan came in, the high point of the season. So the first 4 games of this 10 stretch was a draw, a win, and a draw. So we drew away at Barrow. We won 2-0 at home at Cambridge, 1-0 at home to Crawley, and then drew 2-2 at Oldham. And it felt like in this period, Michael Appleton had clearly moved away. Now Mickey Moore had gone. He had the reins. He'd got rid of the 3 at the back. He'd moved to a 4 at the back. He was introducing his own structures and his own way of working. And it felt like he was starting to implement something that might be able to be effective, especially in that little 4-game streak. We felt like we were more robust at the back. It was harder to score against us. We still weren't creating huge amounts, but it felt like we were taking a slightly more effective direction. Would you agree on that one? Did you remember back to that little period of optimism?
Yeah, that Cambridge one was a big one, wasn't it? That 2-0 win. I remember a video from some Cambridge fans, and they're like, obviously it's a video blog, and at halftime they were talking about how they're going to win 3-2 or 4-2. And it was a side that obviously completely, I wouldn't say underestimated us, but almost didn't put enough effort in, and kind of had a really, really poor performance, which meant that we could win. And the Crawley and the other win against Newport, obviously against relegation rivals apart from Cambridge, felt like we turned a corner. And I think probably these points around this period might probably save Appleton from being sacked at this point.
Yeah, I think he'd have gone before January if he hadn't had this upturn in results briefly. But it wasn't to be. It wasn't to last. I remember after that 4-game stretch and everybody was very positive. We had an away game at Crewe. Everybody piled on the train. We sold out the allocation and we got absolutely seen off. We were nowhere near it that day. Tommy O'Reilly had a brilliant performance against us, man of the match, and we got done 3-1. And it took a little bit of the air out of the balloon because for a local derby, you want it to be the one they can get up for and keep building the momentum. And we just couldn't quite get it over the line that day. We followed up with a win at home to Newport, but then after that, it was lost, draw, and the steam came out of the engine a little bit. And that was the moment I think that Appleton really could have saved his job. That Crewe result, if he'd have carried one over there and got that momentum rolling, he might have built something, but he just didn't seem to be able to maintain it with the squad of players. They would believe for a little while, and then it would dissipate again, wouldn't it? I don't know, Chris, have you got Any thoughts on those sort of that period of the season?
Like you say, it started very positively. That Barrow game stood out in my head, Mike. Do you remember the gale force wind that day? And it was 0-0 at half. It was 0-0 at half time, but we had really failed to make the most of that wind, and I fully expected us to get battered. And actually, second half we were very good in unbelievably difficult conditions. We played well, and that seemed to give them a lift. And like you say, took us on that good little run. And it could have been 3 in a row because the Oldham 2-2, Oldham scored deep into injury time to save a point that day. But then, like you say, after that, it dipped. And that run of draws with the Gillingham game, we were you've mentioned, we were 3-1 up at half time in that game. And Gareth Ainsworth had his stunning little comeback, which he enjoyed, didn't he? I think he was going around telling everybody that another 5 minutes and we'd have had you. And yeah, he might well have done, but tough luck, Gareth, he didn't. But yeah, with that that was part of a run of 8 games without a win again. And at that point, Appleton was losing the room again, wasn't he? And at this point, fans were getting very worried, and that was taking us into the January transfer window, which I'm sure you're going to talk about at the minute. And that was probably going to be Appleton's last throw of the dice, because at that stage, we were coming into Christmas looking in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, so that 10 games, 3 wins, 5 draws, 2 losses. So a slight improvement, 14 points from 30. It's not a bad haul, really, in a 10-game stretch. We scored 12 goals, conceded 13. So again, trouble getting the ball in the net the other end, and that's always going to do you in at a points per game of 0.46, which is an improvement from his 0.16, but still relegation form. You're not even getting a point a game. So although it felt like an improvement, like Chris said, some of the results that we did get were unconvincing. We just weren't getting that momentum in those 10-game stretches. Like I said, Michael Appleton, he put more of a structured approach, and it was his team now. He could be judged by the results. He wasn't being handheld by Mickey Moore. And it was just, we ended that 10-game patch 20th. So we actually improved our league position. We were 1 point outside of the relegation zone. And that ended up being our highest league position under Appleton, I think, unless we might have got 19th, 18th, but I think 20th was our ceiling with him. We got out of the relegation zone, but not by much. In that time, we had a few okay games in the cup. I mean, okay in terms of results. We beat South Shields in the first round of the FA Cup, and then we went to Sutton and won 2-1, which sounds good on paper. But when I look back at that Sutton game, do you remember how poor we were in that Sutton game? We went there and we were losing until the 91st minute when Cabia scores a rocket. We somehow scrape ourselves back into the game, think, right, we're going to have to take this extra time penalties. And then for some reason, one of their defenders squares the ball to John Marquise in the middle of the box, and he scores in the 92nd, and somehow we escape with a win. And I can remember John Marquise being quite bullish after that game in the interview, saying, yeah, that's what I'm there for. That's what we came to do. But we were absolutely terrible in that game. And it was just another result that sort of papered over the cracks. I think, again, if we'd have gone out to Sutton in the cup, that might have been the end for Appleton. But he sort of limped on after that result as well. Other sort of notable bits of news in that time, we sadly said goodbye to Toto Nsiala on October the 15th. Do you remember Toto left? He had to go for family reasons. And I think we wished him all the best. But yeah, his second spell at the club wasn't quite what we hoped it would be, was it? Apart from that tackle on old, what's his name, James McLean, which we all love and watch back on a regular basis. We also lost Bradley Ihovian for the rest of the season, pretty much until recently to a knee injury. That happened around then. He had to go away for surgery on his meniscus. Would have been interesting to see what a full season for Brad would have been like. He's lively. He's got a goal in him, isn't he? He can be a bit selfish at times. His work rate is sometimes lacking. He's a bit of an attitude, but I think he's a goal scorer. He's been released by Peterborough now. He's available for transfer, so we might be in for him in the summer. So we'll have to wait and see. We love scoring. We love signing footballers who previously had knee injuries for us, as James Weslowski and George Nurse will attest. So we must have a good knee clinic at the club. So we'll see if he comes in. But I thought he was all right. I wouldn't mind seeing him all season.
Yeah, he definitely had the best goal to game ratio of any player. He scored 2 goals in 8 starts. Versus George Lloyd with 4 goals in 25 starts, and John Marquise with 3 goals in 29 starts. But bless Bradley, he also got 5 yellow cards in those 8 starts. He did also 4 subs appearances. But yeah, I agree with you there, Mike. He's probably the best of a bad bunch. I think it's probably
we might not have had to rely on old John and George quite so much as we did until Morgan came in. But yeah, so the only other thing to mention in that period was that was when that very random news article from Roland Wycherley appeared in the Daily Mail. Do you remember? One of the oddest things I've ever seen related to Shrewsbury Town. He'd rung up a Daily Mail journalist because he'd written something negative about him and invited him down for a big interview. where he covered a number of things about the fact that he can't go to Sainsbury's anymore because everybody's swearing at him in the car park. He went into his love of horoscopes and how he's a metal snake. Do you remember he's a metal snake? That was something that came out of that interview. He divulged that his girlfriend left him because they put his real age in the newspaper. I don't know whether that was a joke or not, but that was quite an odd thing for him to say. And he went into detail about some Saudi imposters who tried to buy the club, about John Terry being involved with trying to buy the club. And it made us sound like an absolute basket case and like a guy it would be very difficult to do business with. And I'm still looking back now, I'm not really sure what the point of that article was, but it was just a bit funny, really. I thought. Now looking back, it was an odd action from an odd moment in time, I think.
It was very strange. Yeah, he invited him for pie and mash or something. And
that was
he
it. Yeah,
talking something about. Was he talking something about Oldham as well or something? And I don't know. It was very odd. It was very
how his food was better than Oldham's food, and yeah, very strange. So, but it was worth just looking back at that one as well, really, and just remembering another odd shambolic moment of a messy season. And that takes us into Michael Appleton's final 7 games. So, from the 13th of December to the 27th of Jan, when he was relieved of his duties, and this is a real shocker of a section. In that 7 games, we had 1 win against Harrogate, 1-0 at home. We lost every other game. So we lost 1-0 to Chesterfield, 3-1 to Cheltenham, 1-0 to Grimsby, 3-0 to Bristol Rovers. All teams we needed to get something out of, especially Cheltenham and Bristol Rovers, relegation rivals at the time. And then the real one that did for him was the 5-1 thrashing at MK Dons. We were abject that day, and I think the rumor was that he was done on that day, but they needed the Cambridge game, which we also lost 1-0 to sort out an alternative. So it was absolutely due for the loss. You know, in that game, 4 points from 21, scored 4 goals, conceded 15. That's a horrible stat. His points per game was 0.19 points per game, so nearly back to where he was at the start of the season. And it just shows absolutely no progress under him, whether he had a director of football, whether he was in charge. You know, he just couldn't get a tune out of the players at his disposal. And that also, in that time, we lost 6-1 to Wolves in the Cup as well, when Harrison went back in goal. We tried to play football against a Premier League team with a high defensive line. It was absolute carnage, absolute car crash. And all that sort of fed into him losing his job, quite rightly as well, I think. Also, so you just want to cover that, really? That sort of
there's a couple of key games. Yeah, a couple of key games in there for me. I think the Cheltenham away on Boxing Day was obviously great for Steve Cottrell. Obviously, Steve Cottrell got Cheltenham out of the relegation fight, so obviously it made it even harder for Shrewsbury. And yeah, he absolutely scored us that day. Shrewsbury Town looked naive. And then I did that game for BBC Shropshire. This is where I was, obviously Jamie Tolley had better things to do, and me and Chris were getting the call to support. And then I did the Grimsby away one, and we changed to 4 at the back for that one. He said it was 4-4-2, but it was more of a 4-2-3-1 perhaps. And I remember like doing the game, and like it was really like, you know, it's really a pleasure to do co-commentary with the BBC. It's fun. But I really didn't actually enjoy that one at all, because I was almost getting a bit worried every time Stu was going to come to me, because I literally was like, I have no idea what I'm going to say now. Like, I can't keep saying John Marcus has passed the ball out of play. Like, there was literally a game where we were literally just passing the ball out of play consistently. Like, Perry, midfield. It's just the summary of everything, wasn't it? The defence was terrible. And there was no tactics. Like, the midfield don't get the ball, they don't control the game. And I remember at one point talking about Grimsby's inverted fullbacks as at least something to talk about, because there was literally nothing to talk about from a Shrewsbury Town perspective. And that for me almost just like, I'm sure you're going to comment to it now, Mike, maybe I'm teeing you back, but almost just sums up what was Appleton's era.
Well, and that's it. And that's what you're saying there is the reason why I've never, even though I've not been asked, I wouldn't do those Shrewsbury commentaries, because I couldn't keep me.
Oh, but some of the Barnet was amazing. I've had some
really good ones.
Stu and Nick do a great job as well in the chest. I've had mine's been chalk and cheese. Chris can't necessarily say the same, because I did the Barnet win and the Chesterfield win, which were great games to cover, proper tactics, amazing to cover. And then I did Cheltenham away and Grimsby away, which are other realm of the extreme. So I got a 50% win ratio, which is better than Shrewsbury Town. I'm not sure what Chris's ratio is. But yeah.
But yeah, going back to your question, that the question about what was the Michael Appleton era. I mean, a man who comes in who talks a good game really and couldn't get it done. We never really saw anything from him at all, did we? There was no consistent set of results. There was no clear tactical approach. I mean, he could probably come back and point the he ended up with, in his first spell, he had somebody else's squad. Then he had a director of football who played in a completely different way he did. And then when he got hold of it, it was too late in the day. You could have all the excuses, but ultimately, if that's the excuse, why take the job? Why come and manage with a director of football that you knew had a different approach to you? If that's the truth, And nobody's going to look back on his time with us with any fondness. He wasn't a personable bloke. He wasn't somebody who was easy to warm to or get behind. And it just a real sorry episode in the club's history, I think. I don't know. What do you think of the old Appleton reign, Chris?
I will say what we haven't really touched on here in this last section was the January transfer window, and Appleton's biggest contribution to this football club was in that.
Chris. Don't worry, it's in the research, it's in the notes. Don't you worry about that, my friend. You just talk about Michael Appleton for a bit.
Well, but to me, that is the only thing I really want to thank him for, because ironically, he made decisions in January that he didn't get to benefit from. I mean, his successor did, but he brought in a couple of players that helped to turn our season around. And that Cambridge game, which proved to be his last game, I went to that one for radio. And even though we lost that 1-0 to a slightly controversial and late penalty, we were actually decent that night. And if you told me at that moment on that Tuesday night that the next day he was going to get sacked and 24 hours after that we were going to have Gavin Cowan as manager, I wouldn't have believed you. It just felt to me if they were going to do it, that they would have done it back in December, and having given him the January transfer window, they were going to give him time to make something of it. So it all seemed like the planning was all over the place to me. Obviously, it worked out in the end, as we'll come to, but it was all very strange. But I think Appleton's football obviously didn't work, but to discuss him in the round, I think we have to let you do your section on the transfers as well, Mike.
Yeah, so before we get to the transfers, another little note that we picked up in here. Chuck Zaniki, we talked about already, he left the club in January, but he didn't leave the club. He left his playing duties. Is he? And he said he was going to become a scout and part of the analysis team. Is he still at the club?
I don't know. He's not listed on the club website, but it's another question for the club. Who does actually work for the club?
That was a little random, a real random pickup, because part of me thinks it was just an excuse to say, well, we just said to Chuck, you're just not good enough, go away. We'll pay your contract. We just don't want you about. I think there's an element of that to it. And we said, he's going to be a scout, but actually, I think he's just living off. He's on guard.
Well, Appleton said he's got a good eye for a player, but again, with most things with the club now, it's hard. It's hard to believe it fully. You have to question everything almost.
But I'm actually stunned how much run Chucks has had in this podcast with Matt. He did it to the club, so good on you, Chucks. That's it. So in that time, obviously, all that was going on. We did have the transfer window, like Chris said. We brought in Ewan Morgan on the 1st of January from Brentford. I think we ought to be. That's an excellent signing. Trey Ogunsoy came in on the 9th of January from Sunderland. He didn't really do a lot, and he wasn't picked by Cowan at all, really. Towards the end, was he? I think he always looked like he had a bad attitude to me, but everybody looks like they've got a bad attitude to me, I think. Nick Freeman came in on a short-term deal on the 13th of Jan. He was effective enough, I think. And then Matt Cox was one of the most important ones we brought in on the 15th of Jan, who really shored up the defensive area. Because Brooke started well, didn't he? But had a bit of a fade off. And then Cox was able to step in and just get us over the line, I think. So like Chris says, some good players brought in there. I mean, a lot of people have said, and I think we had this conversation at the time, well done, Michael Appleton. That was his sort of parting gift. We've got a recruitment team. How much was Appleton? How much was our head of recruitment? We won't know. But, given everything else Michael Appleton did, I don't want to give him too much credit for those signings. So that was Michael Appleton done. The game's done. The players brought in. Looking back at Appleton's time, he had 27 games in that season. He won only 5. We drew 7 and we lost 15. He won a total 22 points out of a possible 81, which is a shocker. We ended with a goal difference of -24, which tells all you need to know about which goals are going in. And he ended up with a points per game over those 27 games of 0.81. So bang on relegation form, exactly where we should have been. And that is me exhausted of all my research and all my work. So I'm going to sit back now and hand over to Chris for the next section of the season, which is the good fun bit. Chris, you've got Gav Cowan's introduction and sort of safety over the line, I think, isn't it?
I just want to interrupt there just a little bit. Sacking of Appleton is so this board. The timing of it is insane that we give a manager a window and then we give a new manager, was it 2 days of the window? Yeah. So just like when we signed changed director of football. We faffed around for months. Then eventually he came in. Then he faffed around for weeks and got Matt Taylor, who had hardly any time to prepare. Like we just consistently shoot ourselves in the foot. And yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Is the timing of it was just insane.
It's a consistent problem, isn't it? Making late knee-jerk reactions to things, making decisions at exactly the wrong time. Like you say, to give a manager, we signed Matt Cox on the 15th of Jan. He had most of the window before he went, didn't he? And it just, again, you've got Gav Cowan coming in. And again, it just says the wonders that he did coming in with an inherited even transfer window and doing what he did. But I won't steal any Chris's thunder, and you can take us through that. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so if we move on now then to the next section, we're going to talk. I get to do the fun bit, as you said, Mike. Mine will be slightly less depressing, which is nice. So it all it was all very surreal, wasn't it? As we've touched upon, we lost that Cambridge game on the 27th of January, and on the morning of the 28th, we get the announcement that Michael Appleton's been sacked. And we all came together as a group and did a podcast that night to discuss the sacking of Michael Appleton and to speculate a little bit on what might come next as well. And we discussed many of the candidates. I remember I made a passionate case for Pete Wild. I was convinced he was the man we should go for. And I think we mentioned Gavin Cowan as he's a name that's been suggested out there, but we didn't take it that seriously. And then we finished the podcast and somebody sent me a message saying it's going to be Gavin Cowan. And that person was correct, because the very next day it was announced that Gavin Cowan was the manager of Shrewsbury Town. Now, my initial reaction to that, I'll be honest, I was not at all convinced. I thought we're bringing in a guy who's, he's managed AFC Telford, did okay, nothing more. And yes, he's had a promotion at Brackley, but they're a very well-financed club in Conference North. And frankly, they've been knocking on the door for years, and it was always going to happen at some point. So I wasn't at all convinced. And as I'm talking, I'm wondering why I'm seeing Jose Mourinho on my screen.
What the hell's that?
So this is a GIF I kept sharing around that time. So yeah, I was in Wales when we did that emergency podcast. We did the whole podcast basically with my phone in the window, kind of as a receptor to get all the information. And for some reason, I think I took my MacBook just in case something was going to happen. And I remember posting this photo like several times, and this was my response to hearing that we were getting a non-league manager. And I think it'd be remiss of me to kind of try and forget or kind of hide the fact that this was my gut reaction to Gavin Cowan coming. Chris had convinced me on that podcast that we needed a really experienced football manager who's done well in the EFL. And then, the next morning, it basically broke, didn't it? So our podcast was probably not listened to by many people before it was like completely out of date. Obviously, Gavin Cowan's done really well, what we're saying now, and obviously has done really well. I fully feel obviously it was a good decision, but I think that was my gut thoughts. And what was your gut thoughts at the time, Mike?
Yeah, I can remember telling people at work, I thought we were doomed. I thought we were bringing in a guy with no experience, doesn't know how to battle as well out of relegation in the league. I was completely unconvinced by it. I can hold my hand up and say I've been proved absolutely 100% wrong in the end of that season and the job that he did. And I'm willing to give him far more patience and time next season with that credit in the bank. So, yeah, I think we all ended up with a little bit of egg on our faces. But I guess it's the natural reaction. He was completely untested on a football front, but I think we didn't consider quite how important the raising of the morale of the squad was, of getting the players on side, of getting the fans on side, of healing those rifts between the football side and the fan side, and the work that he and Dave Edwards and Jamie all did on that front, which I saw, firsthand when my lad was mascot, and his approach to engaging with the people that were coming in early and that were around, not just the mascots, but even just the people in the stands and stuff, was a breath of fresh air from what I saw under Appleton and Ainsworth.
And so, I think Edwards was the master.
Yeah, Dave was brilliant. Dave was fantastic. And I think that immediately brought them 6 or 7 weeks
that coiled. That took the if it was like that for me like almost like took the heat off, didn't it? Yeah. It was a blue and amber kind of like tinge to the appointment.
For more of the decisions they made around. Again, I don't want to jump on Chris's stuff, but like promoting how Jamie came from the youth academy, Dave was from the youth academy, Gav played for us, and other decisions they made through the next few games were brilliant masterstrokes. Just kept, morale is a great thing in football, and they kept the vibes rolling, and it helped with that brilliant run that we went on. So I think we all questioned his football side, but we didn't really appreciate how good he was at all the softer stuff, all the team, the culture building stuff.
Yeah, one of my catchphrases is that you should wear your convictions lightly, and I think we were all convinced that this was a strange decision. We all admit we were proved wrong, and I think that's okay. It's okay to be wrong, but I think you have to admit it when you're wrong, and we've just done that. Gavin Cowan has more than won us around. But let's look back at what it was like at that time. So he gets appointed, and I remember his very first interview. It was classic Gavin Cowan. All the cliches were coming out. He wanted the players to trust the process. He wanted them to do a job and a half. They were going to have to jump higher than a mountain. All this stuff. That stuff, I'll be honest, it makes me cringe. But I think the one thing you can say is he's incredibly consistent. He says the same things over and over and over again. And I think that resonates with his players in some way. It seems to work for him. And, he took it into the games. And I must admit, my confidence had gone up a bit. And then I got to the pit ground on the day of the Barnet game, and the team news came up, and my confidence went straight back down again, because he surprised me that day. He left out all of the loan players except for Matt Cox, and he went back to all these players that, from our perspective as supporters, we'd already seen are either not good enough or have let us down one time too many. So it was a bit of a shock to find. He made some big calls. Sam Stubbs had been frozen out by Michael Appleton, straight back in for that game. Mal Benning, it had been clear he had no future at the club, straight back in for that game. The lineup looked like Shrewsbury from 6-7 months earlier, and to be fair, it performed pretty poorly. It wasn't a great game, was it? That 0-0 draw with Barnet. I think Barnet were frustrated that day. I remember their journalist having quite a pop at us on social media, calling us the least ambitious side he'd ever sseen or something. It was a painful watch. It wasn't enjoyable, and it didn't give me a lot of confidence. And then it's the second game, Gavin Cowan's first away game. We all took. I headed off to Colchester. That was my second radio appearance, so I was quite lucky, really, that I got to do Gavin Cowan's first away game. And there was a bit more attacking intent that day, but still, we ran out 2-0 winners. And I remember Gavin did a radio interview that night where he was incredibly positive. He really spoke up about how well his team had played, and it seemed what he was saying didn't match up to how I think a lot of the supporters who'd been at that game had felt. So at that point, I was probably starting to feel a little concerned again. And I'm looking at the bottom of the table and thinking, is Gavin the man to get us out of this? And then the next 5 games happened, and once again he proves me utterly and completely wrong. And I think that's I dare say we'll talk about these games at length, but this is the period when Gavin Cowan basically got Shrewsbury Town fans eating out of his hands, because we suddenly had this incredible February that transformed our season. You take that month out of our season, and we go down. You know what I'm saying? February kept Shrewsbury Town in the Football League, and for fans of a vintage. I remember it brought back memories to me of 95, 96. The year we first got to Wembley, and that season we won not in all competitions 9 in a row around October and November. And if that hadn't happened that year, we'd have gone down as well. And it was just the same. It was our season saved by 1 month of football. And that Barrow game, my son was mascot that night against Barrow, and I remember having a chat to Dave Edwards before the game about the team selection. And I'd noted that he picked Anthony Scully again, who'd been pretty poor against Barnet and pretty poor against Colchester. And Dave admitted to me that he'd been close to being left out that night, but they said, we just feel he owes us a performance, and we think if we give him another one tonight, he's going to pay us back for it. And Anthony Scully goes out and scores the first goal of the Gavin Cowan era, and things started to roll from there, didn't they? That night was a scrappy win. We weren't fantastic against Barrow, but what we did show was character to get the result. So that got us up and running. And that was followed by that Swindon Town game. And that Swindon game was, to me, the highlight of our whole season in terms of football performance. We played Ian Holloway's side, who played good football, and we really earned the win that day against Swindon Town. Do you remember we took the lead through Ewan Morgan, and then Swindon got a bit of a fluky goal to equalise just before half-time, and it was quite dispiriting because we played so well. But I was expecting that would knock our confidence, but instead we came out in that second half and we just lifted it again, and we were absolutely fantastic. Lloyd got the second, and then Nick Freeman got the third that day. I think that was his only goal for us. But we were really, really, really good in that game. Before I go on to the others, what about you two? What did you remember of those Barrow and Swindon games? Because that's what really got us up and running.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the first game, because the first game, as you said, was a lot of emotions, and the start of the Gavin Carron era was quite rocky, to be honest. I think remember me and Mike talking to each other as we came out of Block 17, saying we didn't understand why the fans were so angry. Like the management team had literally had 24 hours to kind of coach this team. And to be fair to the team, at least we saw the channel balls, didn't we? At least we saw some kind of elements of tactics and some kind of just some kind of structure to the team. Yeah, bringing back the old guard was not a good idea. I can maybe understand why they were doing it at the time. I thought maybe they were doing it to give them one last chance. Maybe almost a bit like your Scully comment there, Chris. But then, yeah, obviously the first few games didn't give us a lot of confidence. Obviously, you know, it all changed after that. But that was my initial thoughts, Mike.
Yeah, I think Carron's he's quite old school as a manager. I think he's, you know, from the sort of, there's a bit of Peters about him.
I think a bit of both. Yeah, that's a bit. I think maybe there's balance in there. There's a bit of old school in there.
Yeah, there's a bit. He's got them old school sort of work ethics a little bit, and I think we talked about at the time. He put all the pros in there, and he said, "You guys have been doing this for years. Like, go and do your jobs." He put the onus on the experience and on the players who've been there and done it. You know, these young lads, these loanies, they shouldn't be doing your job for you. Go and do your own job. Was seemed to be the message. And I can remember we played the most reductive, basic, back to basics tactic. We were pressing in our own half, just on the edge of a box. It was 11 men between the ball and the goal. You know, we compressed the space and we just tried to hit on the break, didn't we? And it was, fans were losing their marbles, like trying to get them to play out. But at the end of it, we got a point against a team that we didn't expect to get one against. And it was the ends justifying the means a little bit. And then that built the fact. So it was almost like Cowan building the foundation before we put the roof on. So that
he didn't want to lose his first EFL game.
Exactly.
He didn't want to lose his first EFL game.
He also didn't want to come in and or shit goals or anything. And then that set the standard, didn't it? In terms of like, we give you a very basic, structured, disciplined football approach. You've got to all do your individual jobs and keep that structure. And then every week after that, they seem to try and add a little bit more on. So then it was, the fullbacks were getting a bit more further forward. The midfielders were able to play a bit more and not just watch the ball go over their heads. You know, the strikers were going into the channels more, and it was the first time in under Appleton, under Ainsworth, even under Hurst, and certainly under Taylor, that I could tell what they were trying to do. The approach on the pitch made sense, and you could see them trying to build things, and there being a structure there that the players understood and that they were actually implementing as well. And it felt like a real light bulb moment for me watching it. And, oh God, this is what we should have been seeing for the last few years. So that's what I liked about it, and that built into those wins that Chris was talking about. Those brilliant wins came on the back of we closed the door at the back. We stopped conceding so many goals. We made it life easier for the goalkeeper to push up, so the defense could push up, so that we could play football in the opposition's half a little bit more, and just do the basics. And that's what led to that little run, I think. So it's hard to take those games in isolation because they all build off one another, I think, through that little period. When you look back,
they were wins as well, weren't they? Against teams that were at the top end of the table. So we were really showing up to that point. We were only really winning the games against, the Newports or the Crawleys. We weren't beating anybody else at all, frankly. And then suddenly we beat Swindon, and which I've just covered, and we followed it up with that win against Notts County as well, which was another good win. Notts County were in good form at that stage, and we beat the 1-0 that night with a goal from Taylor Perry, an absolute screamer, and then 3 home games in a row, we've won them all. That's fantastic. But now he's got to somehow show he can get results on the road as well, because that's something we hadn't done since September and that Barnet game we talked about earlier. And we go to Accrington, and I remember I was sat next to you for that one, Mike, and we were good day, weren't we? And it was one of those games where we scored at the right times. We were 1-0 up in 2 minutes. You go into the second half, the game less than a minute into the second half, Luca Hulls made it 2-0, and it just felt comfortable. We were in control of that game throughout. And we almost could have won by more. It just felt so easy, and that's really bizarre. I can't remember seeing Shrewsbury away from home look so in control of a football match. So that was 4 in a row, and the crowd's going nuts by this stage. By this point, I think Gavin Cowan walks on water for most people in blue and amber. Do you remember the chance of 4 in a row? Ole, ole. And obviously we then went off to Salford the next game and win again, and it's 5 in a row now. And that was unbelievable as well. The character again, because we went 1-0 down at Salford, and we weren't great. 1-0 down at half-time. It's been a battle. And then the second half, we turned it on its head. And do you remember Will Boyle's winner? You think of him as a defender who comes up with a big header from a corner or a free kick, and here he is chesting one down and almost half volleying it into the bottom corner. Lovely finish. Yeah. So that was unbelievable. 5 in a row at this point, and I remember there was some slightly crazy fans on social media starting to talk about playoffs and things. And you think, calm down a little bit. I think we were still at a stage where we could have won every game for the rest of the season, and we might not have made it, but. Certainly relegation now looked a forgotten dream. It's amazing what 1 month can do. Those 5 games have put a 10-point cushion in there. Now, no, okay, you're not mathematically certain with that kind of gap, but my God, it was going to take a hell of a sequence of results to send us down from that position. So he took the pressure off, didn't it? And it's just a shame that we lost to Walsall. That was always hate to lose the derby. But then they bounced back from that with the Chesterfield game, that's where we won 3-2. I think Ollie touched on that earlier. Fantastic away win with a late goal again. And that was character from us, because I think Chesterfield equalised, didn't they, Ollie? If you remind me if I've got that right. There was an equaliser there from Chesterfield, and then we popped straight up the other end and go and win it.
Yeah. There's it was 1-1 at half time, and then they went ahead, and then eventually. Goalie got to 2-2, and obviously we scored from a set piece in extra time to send Shrewsbury Towns going mad. It was a key win, wasn't it, against a side where we got absolutely battered, to be honest, on the day. Like Chesterfield could have scored like 4 or 5 that day. We were fortunate. Again, Cox, as he did for a number of games. At this point, I think around this point, Chris, there was that stat that Matt Cox had made the 3rd or 4th most saves, like key saves in the division, even though he'd been there for a matter of months.
About 8 games, yeah.
Yeah, and he was massive, wasn't he? And also the players were performing actually to their level, or to a good level, and it's all coming together.
But just mention actually. Sorry, while you're talking about players, we've sort of skipped over, unless Chris was going to come to it. The one signing that Gav Cowan did make was Burko, fixing that hole at left back, that massive problem that we had all season. It helped out in a number of different areas. It means we didn't have to move other players around; they could play in their own position. So the one transfer that he had a hand in as well was a bit of a masterstroke and gave us much better structure going forward.
Well, in terms of structure, for me, the big changes he made was obviously Cox being in goal was obviously key, but then also having Sang and Perry midfield was key. We were bypassing midfield. At least we had legs in there.
Yeah,
and also,
I'm still not convinced by them too.
No, I'm not saying no.
You're not selling me on them.
No, I'm not trying to sell you on them, but they did a better job than what we were having before then. And then we saw, obviously, we had Ruffles being moved to left centre back. That was a key.
And he did that first game. I had that in my notes and forgot to cover it, so I should have said that was a big decision he took.
Yeah, he took big. Obviously, then we had Boyle, Ruffles, and Huell in the back. We had Sang and Perry. While I don't think they're very good footballers, we're going to see them next season potentially. They're in the squad for next season. We just looked, and then you put Burke on the left, Cabby on the right. We had a bit of balance. We didn't have Klukas playing at left wing back. We didn't have and also they played a number of games together as well. So that was, I think, was key. So on the pitch, you said, Mike, there was structure to our play. It was obvious what we're trying to do. We kind of obviously optimized set piece delivery as well. But then also, obviously, Gavin Cowan and obviously Dave are obviously more aware than most management team would be coming from the area. Obviously, Haynes as well, is that there was a huge gulf and a big disconnect between the fans and the club. And there was a few key things they did. And for me, one of the highlights for me was when Dave Edwards did the Notts County away post-match.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. It is probably the best post-match I've ever heard from a Shrewsbury Town member of staff. And it was a PR masterstroke, perfect timing. It wasn't Gavin Cowan. He didn't have to talk about himself. And then Dave Edwards and also as David did it, he gave insight, which is what fans clamour for. We love insight. We love a bit of insight in terms of what they're thinking. He shared some tactics. He talked about how hard they're working, things that Gavin Cowan couldn't say. And it was absolutely masterstroke. I remember watching. I was actually on holiday in half term, watching it with like a big smile on my face, watching the post match, thinking this is absolutely brilliant. I'm on cloud 9 right now, and for me that was probably one of the highlights of the season. It's really weird that win. And then that post match for me was massive, and it was part of the foundation what they're building. They weren't just focusing on the pitch; they were focusing off the pitch as well.
Yeah, and it's like we spoke about at the time as well. It's sort of the benefit of having a couple of podcasters as your coaches. They're very good communicators. They can really get their message across and their point across. They're very polished with their delivery. They don't mumble their words. They don't forget some of the points they're trying to raise. So like again, it's a little bit of an unexpected benefit of bringing those guys in, is that they're very good at getting it across and taking people with them, I think. And then they were backing it up with those wins all the time as well.
I'm conscious of time, so I'll take us on. I was up to the Chesterfield game, so that was 9 games under Gavin Cowan by this stage. At this point, we've won 6, drawn 1, and lost 2. So we went into that Cheltenham game on middle of March, 14th of March. That was the 10th game of Gavin Cowan's era. He had the chance that day to be the first Shrewsbury manager to win 7 of his first 10 games in charge. Sadly, that was not to be. It would have. We lost 2-0 that day, didn't we? And Steve Cottrell again enjoyed a nice little tour of the ground, waving to all the fans, which was slightly surreal. But it still left Gavin Cowan with the 4th best record from his first 10 games in charge of any Shrewsbury manager since we entered the Football League. So if he's 4th, just as a Ollie, quick quiz then for you two. Who's the top 3? I would expect you probably to get at least 2 of these.
Oh man, I remember we went through and got like Glyn's stats, didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh man, Graham Turner was definitely in there.
Well done. So Graham Turner's number 1. He's the only Shrewsbury manager ever to go undefeated through his first 10 games, 6 wins and 4 draws.
Oh,
well, that would have been my only guess, and I'm assuming it's somebody that's a long time ago. I can't remember.
So 3rd place is Arthur Rowley, 1958. Yes, a very long time ago.
You remember that season, Mike?
I literally just thought that. Yeah.
2nd place, Mike, is during our time as supporters. The second, but
first 10 games.
Oh! It's got to be Oldham manager.
Mickey Mellon.
It's not Mickey Mellon. No, actually, he's about 5th or 6th on the list.
Jesus.
Wouldn't have been Paul Hurst, would it?
Go another decade earlier, Ollie. All right,
yeah.
It's non-league. There's your clue. It's a very good.
Jimmy Quinn.
Jimmy Quinn.
The Quinster.
Jimmy Quinn's 2nd, but again, you have to put the asterisk there that's in non-league. So if you take league managers only, Gavin Cowan does sit 3rd in the record for the first 10 games. So it was one hell of a start from him, despite the defeat to Cheltenham. But sadly, that Cheltenham defeat did start, I guess, a kind of a second phase of this period where results suddenly started to dip. On the back of Cheltenham, we lost to Bristol Rovers 1-0. Steve Evans, who'd actually had a tough start at Bristol Rovers, but he won against us. And they kind of go steamrolled from there, didn't they? And they really pushed up into
a terrible day.
Yes, we lost that. We got thrashed by Crewe Alexandra. Do we remember getting absolutely tonked by them? Tommy O'Reilly scoring.
Ran the show again, didn't he? Yeah.
And then we lost at Newport, which to me was the most depressing of this 4 defeats in a row, because it was a team down at the bottom. And those were the games that actually we had been picking results up in, and we were pretty poor that day. We lost 1-0. And
I went to that one. It was terrible. That was one of the worst performances of the season. Me and Dan were there, and we couldn't believe what we were seeing. It felt like relegation was back on at that point.
You were WhatsApping the group, and I was like, "Oh, looking forward to hearing you two like have this big rant." And you were like, "Oh, there's no insight here. It's just like pure anger,
just shit, basically." Yeah, it was just rubbish. Like there was no real sort of like rhyme or reason.
It was very therapeutic for you two, the way you were chatting to us.
Yeah, it was great.
So that was 4 defeats in a row without scoring a goal. So suddenly, and that was after, I should have mentioned as well, just after that before that Cheltenham game, I think actually Gavin Cowan got Manager of the Month for February. So people talk about the curse of the Manager of the Month award. Well, we lost 4 games in a row without scoring a goal. So it very much felt like the curse had hit us at that period. But at that stage, as you said, we still had a comfortable gap. But we're Shrewsbury fans. We're used to being negative. There was that sense that we were being sucked into it again, and it could still happen. It could still go wrong. So you've got to credit it. You've got to give Gavin some credit that he kept calm, he kept going, and we turned it around. We had that win against Tranmere Rovers. That was an important victory. 1-0 win against them. We went to Bromley and lost 2-1, but we played well in that game. Do you remember Bradley Ehubia gave us a 1-0 lead? Bromley came back and beat us 2-1, but to be fair, there's no disgrace in losing to a team who at the time were top of the league. They went the entire season undefeated at home. It's disappointing, but I can't say that the performance was poor that night. It made me think that if we play like that for the rest of the season, we'll be okay. And sure enough, the very next game, we beat Oldham 1-0 as well, beat Mickey Mellon, who just got a mention a moment ago. And that was the game that got us mathematically safe. And it was nice to do that with a bit of breathing space, So we left that game knowing that we were definitely going to be in League Two. And it meant that we had 3 games of the season still to go and a chance for the manager to do what he wanted in those 3 games. Took the pressure off, didn't it? So on the back of that 4 defeats, to get suddenly 2 home wins in a row again, just calmed us down a little bit. And that was reassuring. Mike,
it felt like that 5-game run took a lot out of the players. It was really unsustainable, wasn't it? They were working so hard, and with a small squad, it was the same team going again and again and again. And I think that 4-game losing streak was just a net result of that, really. Even keeping the sort of the vibes up around they must have all been mentally, physically, emotionally exhausted. I just sort of going back a little bit, I just remembered in that period where the vibes were up, Joe Hart was goalkeeper coach at Salford.
Yeah,
Harry Burgoyne joined again, and he brought another Shrewsbury connection back. You couldn't keep maintaining that. You couldn't sustain it. They sort of played all their cards when they could to keep it rolling as long as they could, you know. And then, so we had that 4-game losing streak. But I think at the end of the season, Cowan managed it as well as he could. Do you remember he dropped, you know, that game you're talking about when we lost to Bromley? He dropped Will Boyle for that game because he was near a suspension or something, and he was tired, and he just thought, well, if he gets a suspension there, he's going to miss the more winnable games that follow afterwards. So actually, we'll hedge our bets here. We're probably not going to beat Bromley anyway. We'll drop our captain, give him a rest, and actually we can then attack the next few games out. So he was doing that a little bit with a few players. I remember Sam Stubbs missed a game as well, and it was just like an energy thing. And he was managing his resources just to try and get enough points to get us over the line. So again, quite smart management from him, thinking 2 steps ahead, thinking 3 games ahead. So again, you got to respect him for his approach right the way through, I think.
Yeah, so it took us into those last 3 games feeling nice and safe, and that was when Gavin Cowan started to plan for the future, didn't he? And we started seeing different team selections, different players being introduced. Will Gray's emerged as, you know, a 17-year-old midfielder of immense promise. We saw quite a lot of him. He played all of the last 4, actually. He was also picked for that Oldham game, which was quite a bombshell selection. But he's gone on to do really well. For the last couple of games, we saw Will Brook brought back in goal. We've talked about how good Matt Cox was, but clearly we won't have him next season. We will have Will Brook. So Gavin Cowan decided to have another look at him, see what he can do. And we even had son of Sam, Hugo Aston, coming on as our 15-year-old youngest ever player. So there was lots to, even though there was nothing riding on these games, lots to see for us as supporters, as it were. It was quite an interesting finish to the season. And we got that draw at Crawley. The 2-2 with Fleetwood was a game I quite enjoyed. We were 2-0 down in that game and came back very nicely to draw 2-2 with Ishmael Kabia's last touch as a Shrewsbury Town player with that ridiculous finish from 35 yards. That this week, of course, landed him the April Goal of the Month award as well. Nice picture of him in his Arsenal kit. He's obviously still in training with Arsenal, and they presented him with the awards down at the Arsenal training ground, which was a bit different. But you know, he was left out for the Gillingham game, so that was literally his last contribution in the Shrewsbury shirt. I'm not sure anyone's ever left our club in quite such an emphatic way before. So, you know, good luck to him, and I hope he goes on to have a good career. And then we go down to Gillingham for the last game of the season with a chance to finish above Gareth Ainsworth, which would have been sweet, wouldn't it? We just needed to win that game, and we'd have actually finished 17th in the table, I think, if we'd won that last game. But instead, it wasn't to be. And we dominated it as well. It was a really bizarre game in that we're not used to this. Shrewsbury away from home are usually backs to the wall, 30% possession kind of thing. And in this one, it was all us. We should have been 2 or 3 up at half-time. Gillingham were dreadful. You know, Gareth Ainsworth's been under huge pressure there, and they weren't particularly good against us. And then right at the end, you watch Luca Hall, who goes on to, you know, just a few days later, I think he'd already picked them up, actually, hadn't he, in the week? He'd won a whole host of Player of the Season awards, and probably deservedly so, over the whole season. But that day, he goes and gives away a silly ball straight to Gareth McCleary, who lashes in a fantastic finish. And it was a classic smash and grab for Gillingham. And that was a bit sickening for me, because it made sure they stayed above us in the table, and that was a disappointing way to end the campaign. But still, a few green shoots, as it were. We end the season with a little bit of hope, and a little bit of hope that maybe next season can be a little bit better, because Gavin Cowan does seem to have some sort of idea. And I know Ollie's going to talk retain lists and all that kind of stuff in a few minutes. But those last few games, what did you think, guys?
That Gillingham game was just, because as you guys know, I've been monitoring the Gillingham situation. As I said, in those 5 games, we could catch them. And they were top of the league in September. Like they were absolutely atrocious. And even though it meant nothing for me, that game was like I don't want to use like a medical kind of condition to kind of dehumanize it, whatever, or kind of demean it. But it was just like, it was torture. Like, it was everything that is wrong with this football club and the players that we saw. And I'm going to pick on John Marquis. Like, how do you miss that chance? Just the same players, fucking shit performances, no application, just absolutely shite. And they fuck up what could have been an easy win. And it would have been a nice end to the season to put one over Gareth Ainsworth, for Will Boyle to have made the right decision to join the team higher in the division.
Yeah.
It would have been a nice end to the season, but they bloody fuck it up because they're so incompetent. And I'm just really hoping that, there's a lot of pressure on Gavin in the summer. And I'm just hoping we can sign better players because, we've been terrible in both boxes. We've been terrible for years, which I'm going to actually bring some stats up. But that was my kind of like, those last few games. Yes, we got the game through. We came back from 2-0 at Fleetwood, which, as you said, Chris, was key. We got the key wins, but just so frustrating, and which is just a summary of what it's like being a Shrewsbury Town fan.
So the miss by John Marquis against Gillingham was clearly awful. He should have scored. I will say, we've all seen plenty of other players do it over the years for us and against us, and I'm not going to be too hard on him for that. It's unfortunately, I'm more frustrated by the whole season in terms of goal scoring.
He's been rubbish for us the whole time he's been here. I remember Swindon away.
He got 12 goals last season. He wasn't rubbish last season.
He was rubbish last year. We got relegated.
John Marquis, that's not John Marquis's fault.
Well, he was one of our 11 players on the pitch, one of 10% of the players on the pitch. He was rubbish this season. I remember playing away at Swindon. He couldn't even control a throw-in. And then there was one bit time he received the ball in the centre of the pitch, and he controlled the ball so badly, Swindon had a counter-attack. He's been awful. And so many other players as well.
Yeah, my assessment of Marquis is the same as Anderson, is the same as Klukas. I think the mind's willing, but they're just at that stage in their careers where they're not physically capable of doing what they want to do, and it frustrates them, and they could take themselves out of the game. And they were obviously good players in their day. All three of them have been, top, Premiership,
John Marquis is
footballers.
Fantastic lower league football striker.
But it's the what's it called, the dichotomy of a Shrewsbury Town fan. By the time you get a player with a name or a player that's had a pedigree, they're past it. That's what happens to us every single time. I can't remember the last player that came to us that had any sort of highly pedigree that came and did his job. Liam Lawrence, maybe. He played brilliantly for us when he came in. But that's what we have to deal with, isn't it? That's the nature of us as a club. But if that was his last audition, the Gillingham game, he fluffed it because that was his last contribution for the town. Was quite the opposite of Ismail Kabir, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was one of the worst misses I've seen in a Shrewsbury shirt. Not quite as bad as Sobowale against Wrexham in the Cup a couple of seasons ago. I think that's the worst. Yeah. That's the worst one I've ever seen. But it was up there.
Curtis Main, I remember against Wolves. Curtis Main under the bar.
Yeah, that's another stinker. Yeah. There's been a few over the years but Marquis's would be in the conversation. I'd thought in the top 5 or 6 because it was certainly one he should have put away. It was, and we'd have probably gone on to win the game if that goes in because we were the better side and Gillingham were at 6s and 7s. So, disappointing. But still, Gavin Cowan's ended with a 42% win rate over his games in charge. That's pretty good. And he's done a very, very good job with the resource. He's proven that he can take a bunch of players and make them a better side. He can make them more than the sum of their parts. We're going to see this summer if he can do the other side of the job. Can he build his own team now? Can he make a better side by bringing new players in? And that's going to be the next test for him. But I think you made a comment earlier, Mike, that he's got credit in the bank now, so he'll have more patience from you. And that's certainly the case from me. If it doesn't instantly click, I think we have to not panic when it comes to August, September, because I think he's done enough to show us he deserves the chance to sort it out. I think we have to give him a little bit of time.
It's sort of the opposite of Appleton, isn't it? Appleton had the end of a season and did nothing. And there was no faith in that he could do any better in the new season. Cowan is the exact opposite, like you say. He's delivered. He's spoken. He's talked a good game, and he's delivered exactly what he said. And there's no reason to think he can't do that again next season with even more of his own squad and more control. Yeah,
he's done a job and a half.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I think I'll leave it there for my section, Ollie, and hand over to you for the summing up section.
Yeah, cool. Cheers, Chris. He definitely did a job and a half when you look at the other managers and how they performed over the last few years. Casting your mind back, Chris, can you remember where you predicted Shrewsbury Town to finish?
See, unfortunately, I've got your agenda open in front of me, Ollie, so it's difficult for me to answer that question honestly. I'm going to say that I knew I'd been relatively optimistic compared to you guys, too optimistic.
Yeah, so Dan went for 15th. He can't defend himself here, but yeah, Chris went for 14th. Me and Mike both went for 17th.
And if it
Luke, you're
hadn't been for that
copying me,
Gillingham
Mike.
game, you could have been spot on. That's where
Exactly,
we would
yeah.
have finished if we beat Gillingham.
Exactly, that's another reason why I was annoyed. But yeah, you know, obviously you guys expected like lower mid-table. Me and Mike thought we might be a bit closer to relegation, and that's where we ended up. So yeah, overall a season to forget. I think some positives in there thrown in there as well, but certainly a season to forget. I wanted to look back over in terms of what's it been like as a Shrewsbury Town fan, and I don't know because I haven't asked this question to Gavin Cowan, but I know Gavin Cowan wants to bring the fans along, but it is really tough being a Shrewsbury Town fan. Like if you look over the last 3 years, we've scored less than a goal a game. So in 2023-24, we scored 35 goals, which is 0.75 goals per game. The last season, the season before last, we scored 41. This season, we scored 42. Of those games, nearly half of them we've not scored. So we still failed to score in 18 games this season. We failed to score in 22 the year, 21 the year before, 22 the year before. You have to go back to Steve Cottrell in 22-23 when we actually scored more goals than games, and that is terrible.
And the club is surprised that YouTubers are coming along and asking, "Is this the most depressed fan base in the country?" Because it's exactly what it says on the tin. You know, we don't score goals, we concede loads, we don't win games, we don't pick up points, and it's all very depressing. Yeah.
We feel, and I will include Parish in this because it's just for dramatic effect. But if you go through like the win percentages of our managers over the last 3 seasons, you've got Taylor with 32, Hurst with 22. Then Hurst in the next season had 14% win ratio. I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. Poor Parish ends up on 0. He had 1 game, no win. Then Appleton was terrible. He had 11% win ratio. Even Ainsworth and his big mouth, he had 22% win ratio. Then he went into this season, Appleton with an 18% win ratio, and then the hero of the day, Gavin Cowan, with 42%, which is mad, really, Chris. That you know, if you put in those stats there, the number of goals scored, and then the manager ratios. It's been a tough 3 years as a Shrewsbury fan, including obviously relegation into League Two in there as well.
Yeah, it's not been a lot to be positive about, has there? We've just watched a gradual decline of our football team, and it's been frustrating and it's disappointing. But we have to hope that Gavin Cowan's the man who can arrest that now. You know, he's shown what he can do with this budget. It's going to be fairly similar next year unless we have any magical takeovers. So the challenge now is for him to show that he can take us back upwards again, because it's been tough, like you say. None of it's been good. He's been the first coach that gives you confidence, hasn't it? We've had, as you say, Hurst Mark II unfortunately never looked right. Ainsworth, it started so well but dipped so quickly, didn't it? And what was it? 7 of his last 8 games were defeats. So it was all direction. So yeah, for once we've got a bright, relatively young coach who gives us a little bit of hope.
Yeah, no, he does. One thing I wanted to talk about as well was go back on the kind of the situation, the director of football and what's going on. Is Gavin Cowan the manager? That needs to be cleared up.
I think, Ollie, before we move on, Chris has got a hard out at 3 o'clock, and I think his sort of marriage depends on him getting out of here. So I think if we can just let Chris go now and say thanks for an amazing season, Chris. Have you got any last comments before you go, and then we'll wrap up the rest of this.
No, just cheers, fellas. It's been good to look back on the season with you, and I look forward to us getting together again, and hopefully with more positive things to talk about in 26-27. So I'll leave you two to wrap up 25-26 and see you again when we start signing a few new players. Cheers, guys.
Super, mate.
Cool. Cheers, Chris. Thanks for joining us. So obviously now, mate, me and Mike need to cover off the retain list and where we go from here.
Hang on, maybe we've got to start slagging Chris off first. No, he's gone. We can start.
Yeah, and all the mistakes and all the edits we've had to do. He's giving me so much homework. It's going to take me so much homework to edit this podcast. He's always he doesn't know how to turn the mute button on and off. So then I thought it was a really good comment actually from Luke, who's put this in his article. So it's a comment from Gavin Cowan, and he said this, Mike. So I'm going to get your thoughts on this. So he said this was Luke writing. He said Gavin has made it clear he wants to build a squad based around athleticism, speed, and energy, and believes a larger pitch will implement that style. Absolutely, said Gavin. With legs, energy, and athleticism, one of your super strengths is going to be running and sprinting. So to make the pitch bigger is only logical to do that. So what's your kind of thoughts on that?
I mean, hook it to my veins. That is absolutely what I want to hear. The lack of pace and energy in our team over the last few years has been depressing. It's been really, really awful to watch. The scariest thing you can see in an opposition team is if they've got a fast footballer. That's why I thought Cabby was our player of the season. His ability to go sort of our box to their box with the ball, join in attacks and get back from defending. And when Burko came in, he was such a breath of fresh air because he is fast. And you can see how terrified our defenders get when they've got to play against somebody who can move and make them turn and things. So that's number one. Pace in the team is vital. A bigger pitch, I've been so frustrated by the size of that pitch this season. It plays into all of our weaknesses. It condenses the pitch. It makes people able to dribble into our defenders very easily. It means it's, when we're defending, we're recycling it back in every now. So a bigger pitch is great. And also energy. A hallmark of good teams, Shrewsbury Town teams, are teams that play until the 95th, 96th, 97th minute. That Paul Hurst season that we all harp on about, we won a lot of games late. We played other teams off the park with our energy as much as our football. And a fit, strong, athletic team that goes the distance is another prerequisite, especially for getting out of League Two. Forget pretty tippy-tappy footballers. I'm not interested in that in League Two. You need engines, you need runners, you need pace, you need directness, you need physicality. And I think that's what we've lacked. Look at our central midfield. Perry and Sang, a strong breeze will blow them over sometimes. They're not strong, imposing footballers, and we lose a lot of the games in there. Our front line, John Marquis, for all his bluster, he bounces off defenders. George Lloyd is bullied off the ball constantly. And that's where we lose a lot of the battles, is in the physicality and our ability to impose our own game on oppositions. From what I've heard about Cowan, I'm not surprised he's focusing on that, because he's always been a big believer in winning your own personal battles, sort of getting the 50-50s and doing a job and a half. And you can only do that if you're fit, strong lads who are capable of doing a full 90 and then some. So I look forward to it. It would be a completely different approach than we've had recently, diminutive footballers that sort of get bullied off. So yeah, bring it on. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of looking at the retain list, and this is the retain list that was launched by the club. Those watching on YouTube can see this. It's obviously the retain list. We'll come on to the players who are under contract next season in a minute, Mike. But let's just say who's left. So obviously all the loan players are gone. Whatever, they've gone. Released was Mal Benning, and then some really sad. Some kids have been let go. So Cairns, Morris, Goodwin, and Loughran have been released as well. Obviously, we don't have an under-21 squad, so it's very difficult for Shrewsbury Town to keep these players. Often I have debates with Shrewsbury Town fans online, and we've got no place for these lads, unfortunately.
Yep.
And if they're not ready to first team football for their benefit, they need to go, because they need to go and play first team football. I think it's harsh, but I think it's better for them just to go. We've seen players bounce back from it. Obviously there's a certain player who plays to Wrexham who's done really well, and I think you need to go to a team, almost have that experience, and then full time whatever. Hopefully they can bounce back.
It's something. If there was ever a taker, I'd like to see it introduced, because we talk about pathways, but we don't have.
It's a big jump, isn't it?
We don't have that extra 12, 18, 24 months for those lads who might make it to have that extra just little bit of football at youth level to kick on. You're either good enough at 16, 17, or you're in the bin. But there's a lot of growing and maturing that happens in that additional 2 years that we can't do. And like you say, you only got to look back at Andre Gray, for example, who made a great career. He was a victim of this at the time. And, how many potential additional assets and resources and sellable assets could we have had if we'd just had that place to play more football? So I understand it's,
and even just a reserve side. Yeah, even if we had a reserve side and we had enough, but we'd obviously we struggled for, obviously go back to Steve Cottrell days. Sometimes we struggled for a bench, let alone a reserve side. And if we had a few more players, we could probably maybe keep them, have a place, enough reserve games to warrant keeping them, plus maybe some loans and maybe there. But there's just not the bandwidth in the club to kind of keep these players, which is a shame. But hopefully they can do well.
I think we realise it's a budget thing, isn't it? It's just another expense the club doesn't need, and we can survive as a club without it. But that's why I say if there's a takeover, it would be great to invest in the infrastructure, in the youth setup, in that pathway, and it would all be part of a sort of the off-field stuff that needs to be fixed at the club a little bit as well, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then other first team players is a name that's going to obviously Alex Gilliard has been released. Who's been at Carlisle. Harrison Biggins as well. That probably didn't bite us in the butt in the end. Nick Freeman, Scully's been released, and Marcus as well. So obviously those players have been released. I think this is new. This is obviously a Gavin Cowan or maybe a Dooley thing. Players available for transfer. We don't normally broadcast this, so that's some openness and transparency in the fairness to the club. So Tom Anderson, Sam Klukas, Dinanga, and Stewart. Any comment on those four?
Surprised but not surprised. I think Anderson and Klukas will be on good wages, and they just haven't done it this season. They neither of them really had that much of a consistent run in the team, apart from Klukas at left wing back, which he never convinced at anyway. They're probably a large percentage of resource in two players who aren't getting any younger, didn't really show that they could do it this season. And I think probably if they held their own hands up, they probably need to move on as well. Not surprised by Dinanga. It never happened for Amir. It was a weird transfer. Another one of Mickey Moore's brain farts that he had, bringing somebody over from Telford. I don't know, made no sense. And Stewart, there's energy there. A lot of people thought there was something in him. Again, a succession of managers have looked at him and thought he isn't good enough. So,
and that's again, always a key test for me.
Yeah, under multiple managers. Again, if we had a reserve team, if we had a more youth set, maybe he could. I don't know. I can't think how old he is now, but maybe he could do a bit of developing if we had the resources to develop players. But you've either got to be good enough or you can't exist at this club. That is the pure reality for footballers at Shrewsbury Town. You're either in or you're out. There's nowhere for people to hide.
No, and keeping them on loan doesn't really do them any favours either. I think it's probably better for them to let them go. And like you say, money is tight at Shrewsbury. We need every penny being spent on the first team squad.
And the other thing to think about Stewart is that Cowan had him on loan at Brackley, didn't he? So he's had real first-hand experience of him. So he's clearly not convinced.
Well, one of the benefits of having so many managers is we have so many people assessing these players. And for me, there's always a big message for me when a plethora of managers make the same decision on players. Interesting, you could say the same thing for Taylor Perry the other way, that Appleton liked him, and that's true. And the manager Gavin Cowan seems to like him as well. So let's look at. I'll change the graphic now for those watching on YouTube. I'm going to now pull up the graphic of my squad image, which sometimes I feel like needs to be refreshed, but it kind of works. So who do we have under contract next season? So obviously the club mentioned that Lloyd is contract. There was a lot of rumours, to be honest. We don't normally talk about rumours that much on this podcast, but there were rumours that he has an automatic renewal in his contract, but the club have said he's got a new contract. We don't know how.
The rumour I heard was that if he played a certain amount of games, he could activate his own extension, and he's chosen to do that. And I suppose if you're a young footballer, you may as well activate your extension, but maybe even still look for a move. He might still not be playing for us. There's no guarantees that he's going to be here. He's just keeping a wage over the summer to try and get away, So
it's a good way.
If that's how it's happened, I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, no. And then players obviously who are, like I said, I think we were saying that there's no guarantees anything. Any of these players could leave. Obviously, we've got Brooke and Boyle, Lee, Stubbs, Sang, and Burko. Obviously, there. I think that's fairly decent, kind of foundation. I'm not overly happy with Stubbs, but Boyle is a good player, I think. And Lee will probably be on a small contract in terms of money. So
he looked good. We didn't really mention him in the review.
He made some mistakes, but he also, I liked how he drove forward. He looks like there's something in him there. And then obviously the two lads, Mike Gray, who's done really well in England as well in central midfield, which gives us a bit of hope from a youth perspective. Yeah,
they've both been excellent at what they've done in the spells that they've had. England sort of dropped out after a while, didn't he, a bit of injury and stuff, but Gray was particularly impressive. We were having a conversation about this the other day. I think they both benefited from the weakness in our central midfield. I think in a normal season, when we'd have had a more robust and sort of developed central midfield engine, they might not have got the chances that they've got. They're both good, but they are still both very raw. And I think they benefited from that, and it's their job to kick on now. But I think if Gav Cowan does the business that he wants to in the summer, they might still be playing a bit part. I wouldn't, which I think would be fair. Exactly, and I think that's great. That would really help their development. Exactly, he's very young, and it wouldn't harm their development not to have all the pressure of 42 game season against experienced footballers on their shoulders. I think they can both do it in small spells or late in game and things. For example, Gray's performance against Ryan Woods when he sort of shut him out of the game in the game against Oldham was very impressive for his age. But I think they need to be bolstered by experience. So the pressure isn't on the young lads to drag a team through a difficult season in their first time. So I like him. I want him to be involved, but yeah, they'll probably have a bit more help in there, I think.
Yeah, no. And in terms of formation, like we are going to be playing 3 at the back. There's no question about that. This is the formation that we saw like 99% of the time under Gavin Cowan.
Yeah.
Is the formation he played at Brackley. It's the formation he favours. It's obviously the system he likes the most.
You haven't got Taylor Perry on there.
Oh no, I have. Yeah, I knew there was someone missing when I looked at this.
I'm not complaining because if he goes, it's yeah.
Yeah. So, but the oh sorry, no, here that's right. Taylor Perry isn't on here because he's been offered a contract. So there's 3 players.
Oh, he's not signed
been
yet,
offered contracts. Yeah. So Taylor Perry, Josh Ruffles, and Huel. Don't worry, I'm normally times I make this image wrong and someone has to correct me. So I wouldn't be surprised if I was wrong. So yeah, obviously they're those 3 players that could sign. There's not really much to say there. I think you have to trust Gavin Cowan and he knows what he wants.
Yeah. I think when you look at that graphic, though, Boyle, Lee, Stubbs, and it would be great if Ruffles signed. That's 4 very good defenders. You can go on with that. Burko at left wing back, obviously need a right wing back. There's a big goal there. But if Huel signs, can he go back out there? There's something to that as well. So if you can get Huel and Ruffles over the line, I think your defence, thereabouts, apart from a couple of back.
Got a good starting point. Maybe add a young. So we had Feeney from Villa. I'd love us to bring some of that in. And I think that what this team's going to be, and this is my kind of summary of what I think Gavin's going to try and do, is he's going to bring in legs and some what you've been dying for, Mike. I think a bit of steel,
bit of bite,
a bit of a git in the midfield who can, a bit like an Ollie Norburn type who's going to put his foot in and is going to have a bit of a stand and a bit of a stand, not going to bully me around, which I think would be key for if we were to sign Perry. It's not really him, but we need someone who's going to got that bit of steel in the midfield.
Yeah,
we're definitely going to get.
What's his name? Anthony Agogo. That's not Anthony Agogo. Well, yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's Agogo.
That's not the boxer. There's a boxer one, and there's
You confused me with the name.
Abu Agogo. Abu Agogo.
Yeah,
he's the boxer, isn't he, Anthony? Abu Agogo or Anthony Grant, players like that would just be in there, put the foot on it, put the tackle in, and offload. And if you've got somebody in there like that, somebody like England and Gray can operate them because they're less responsible for the defensive part. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So my expectations, we're probably going to try and get some. I think he's going to put legs everywhere, pace everywhere, in the back line, in the wing backs, in central midfield, and hopefully we can get someone who's got a bit about them playing that number 10 role.
That top end of the pitch is the huge bit, though, isn't it? Because you look at that diagram, you've got Denanga's the only attack midfielder. Well, he's transfer listed. Stewart's one of the strikers. He's transfer listed. Lloyd's extended his own contract by all accounts. There's no guarantees that Gav Cowan fancies him. And he's been in the press this week saying he's got to score more goals. We can't lie about it anymore. You can't protect the guy. He's a striker. He's got to score goals. So he's sort of laying the gauntlet there and being quite direct and you could almost say critical about his output. 9 in however many goals he scored. In his whole career, he's only scored 9 goals, I think. There's an argument that Lloyd could go in the summer, and then you're looking for a complete new set of strikers and attacking midfielders. The top end of the squad is empty at the moment for all intents and purposes. Yeah.
Well, if you think if Ruffles, Huel, and Perry don't sign, like we literally could have maybe 2 players start the first game of the season. So maybe you say Boyle and Stubbs have probably got a high percentage chance. Burko's done all right, but I wouldn't be against having a better player there. So you could literally have.
He's fine. I think he's absolutely fine.
He's okay, but we've got ambitions to try and get out of the division, haven't we? Maybe not next season. Let's not talk about expectations of next season now. Let's do that with all the other lads back when they're back.
Yeah.
But he's a solid League Two player. He's done really well. He's also adapting to League Two football for the first time. He could push on next year as well. But yeah, I'm just saying you could have 2 players that played last season. Maybe one started the first game of the season. Who knows? That's obviously it was interesting. Ian, when he does his blog, said, don't expect a huge churn because, having some consistency is helpful. I think we all want a change. One thing that Gavin Cowan talked a lot about in his last post-match interviews was culture around the club. And he meant everyone, including people off the pitch, that their expectations are too low and the standards are too low. Yeah. So it's a massive summer for Gavin Cowan. I have a lot of faith in him, and I think he's earned Shrewsbury Town's fans' trust. We're all quite sceptical when he came in, but I think he's done an absolutely fantastic job, and I'm really hope he can be successful.
Completely, and a massive overhaul. I don't think you can make an argument. Even those players on that graphic with contracts who aren't transfer listed, Brooke had good form, then he had very inconsistent form. And then Cox came in. So if you can get another Cox in, Brooke doesn't play. Boyle, I think you've got to say he starts. Anderson obviously transfer listed. Lee, young player, played a little bit well, but I don't think he starts. Stubbs, he was inconsistent. You could argue to replace him. In the midfield, I don't think any of those midfielders' positions is safe. And also, like we said, we've got no strikers. So are you looking at maybe 2 of those players, Burko and Boyle, have established themselves?
You're thinking at least 15 players
next season.
come in.
It's mad, isn't it? We thought we had a big overhaul last season. It's going to be even bigger this season. Massive. Yeah.
And it's obviously you can go either way. It could be that, we're absolutely buzzing in September this year, or it could be where we're worried again. That's almost the fun of the summer and the hope that it can bring you. But hopefully this isn't going to be a new era.
The unspoken part of it is what happens with the takeover.
Yeah, that's why I was,
is that where you were going, was it? Yes. Yeah. Because it's if we've got money to spend, we can do a big quality overhaul. If we've got no money,
I'll tell you what,
the amount of bodies in our budget's bullshit, isn't it?
Well, I said this in our WhatsApp group. How Shrewsbury Town would it be that we complete the takeover on the transfer window deadline?
Yeah. And we've scraped together every player with half a leg that nobody wants, and that's the problem. We're sort of right on a knife edge here. We need so many players that we need money to do that, which leads to invest and
this summer is going to define the next 2 years of the club. Because let's be honest, we had a big hangover with all the Mickey Moore signings because they were so poor. We carried them into this year. A lot of signings this year are going to be, no player's really going to sign a 12-month deal unless they're desperate. If we're competing for players, other clubs are going to offer them 2-year deals at least.
Yep.
So this summer's going to impact next season, not next season, the season after that as well. And the takeover is desperately required. So it's
nobody's heard anything on that, have they?
No, it's gone absolutely dead again, which could be good news or it could be bad news.
We
just have to wait and see and be patient on that one, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Any final thoughts, Mike? Any final comments before we close the pod?
There can't be anything that we haven't said there. That's quite a detailed sort of thorough investigation of the previous season. It was a more fun exercise than I was expecting it to be, doing all that deep dive and stuff on the more chaotic part of the season. And just, not that anybody will from the club, but hopefully somebody from the club listens to this and thinks, we're running a real mess of an operation here and we need to just simplify and be a bit more consistent and clear. And the communication with the fans, it always comes up, doesn't it? But I'm hoping with Cowan at the helm, he has got that sort of approach. He's a very consistent. He says what he thinks and he's open. Dave Edwards is a good communicator. And if they can take their lead from those guys and just approach it with a bit more collaboration with the fans a little bit, I think there's a potential for a good season there. But it all depends on the transfer activity, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You can have as many good vibes as you want, and Joe Hart can come and do some more goalkeeping coaching. But if your players are shit, then you're fucked, in you. So that's where it all matters.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. So thanks everyone for listening. Also appreciate all the comments we get and all the messages we get as we go through the season. Yeah, that really means a lot to us. So thank you for that.
Can I also say thanks to Phil Thomas for his statistical analysis. We used some of your stats in there, Phil. We all picked bits of it up. So thanks for chucking that into us this morning, because I did ask him to do a little bit of his little deep dives.
Thanks for that, Phil. So thanks everyone. Also, thanks for Ian as well for doing his blog throughout the season as well. It's been good to read. As a Shrewsbury Town fan, we're limited to. I think BBC Shropshire do a good job these days, and I don't just say that because I go on there sometimes, but I do think it's significantly improved. And me and Glyn actually met the head of sport at BBC Shropshire when there was a change. And to be fair to the team, they have improved lots, and I think it's a really good show now. So that's great. And obviously, we've got Luke, who's a young budding journalist who's think he's doing a good start with there as well. So there's not a lot out there for Shrewsbury fans to listen to. So if anyone else wants to create content, do that. If you want any questions or help from us, do let us know. But thanks everyone for listening. It's been a tough season. We can all hope and dream of better things in the future, Mike. But enjoy the summer, and we'll be back again before we know it, we'll be back again doing an early season podcast, talking about some new signings. And
what we can say, everybody will leave you with this message: trust the process.
Trust the process.
If nothing else, trust the process.
And I think we can guarantee that Gavin is going to do a job and a half in the summer.
He better had to. He's got a job and a half on his hands, that's for sure.
Perfect place to place it, Mike. Cheers, mate. Thanks very much.
Cheers, mate.